yourself in the chat and where you're based. We'd love to hear where you're calling in from. And welcome. Welcome, everyone. If you are just coming into the chat, please, or into the webinar, please do say your name and where you're coming from in the chat, and we will get started very shortly. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to get us started. Thanks for your patience. Thanks, everyone, for coming to 350 Action's launch of our climate democracy defense work. My name is Tanu Yakupitiage. I am the U.S. Communications Director at 350, and I will be co-moderating this conversation and call to action. For accessibility purposes, I will describe myself and my surroundings. I am a South Asian, specifically Sri Lankan woman with dark brown skin and long black hair. I'm wearing red lipstick and I'm sitting in a black chair at my desk in Brooklyn, New York, which is Canarsie Lenape territory. We're excited to be discussing with you today how we can all work together to defend our democracy with just a few weeks before the most important election of our lives. We are recording this webinar and will send the recording with the transcript and resources shared during this call in a follow-up email. There is also a live captioner with us tonight. Thank you, Sarah. And so if you don't see captions, you can push on the button at the bottom of the screen to see the captioning. Throughout this call, participants can post questions in the Q&A box or the chat, and a reminder to please address your comments to panelists and all attendees so that everyone can see your thoughts. Before we get started, we'd love to know how many of you are part of a 350 local group. A poll will be popping up on the screen, so please do fill it out if you are able to. The poll reads, are you a part of a 350 local group? With yes, no, or I don't know as responses. And we'll give you a couple of minutes just to do that, or a couple of seconds rather. Okay, thank you for doing that. To the tech team, I cannot see the results of the poll. Oh, great. In terms of the poll, about 40% of you said yes, you are a part of a local group. 51% of you said no, and 10% of you said I don't know. Thank you for filling out that poll. If you aren't part of a 350 local group and you would like to be, you can contact us and we can get you in touch with local groups in your area. And just another reminder that captioning is available and to select the captioning button at the bottom of the screen. This year, we've experienced the impacts of, I'm gonna actually pass it over to my colleague Brooke to do an introduction into what we're doing today.
So hello, my name is Brooke Harper. I'm the regional campaign strategist with 350.org. And we're here today to talk about the 2020 election and how we can defend and uphold every single vote. Um, we have a lot of things that we've experienced this year. We've experienced the impacts of 4 years of neglect, rollbacks on policies meant to protect our communities, our air, our water, and this has led to a compound crisis. Today, we're faced with a global pandemic that has led to over 200,000 deaths in the US and counting, catastrophic unemployment, racial unrest, and a president that has not committed to a peaceful transition of power. All of this has made this an unprecedented election season. COVID-19 has also changed every facet of our lives, and the election is no exception. More and more voters are voting by mail this year, and already over 600,000 people have submitted their absentee ballots. We're also seeing a massive effort to suppress the vote through poll closures, voter purges, and now Trump and his legal army are ready to pounce on battleground states to contest election results. And unlike other election nights in the past, we know that this election, there's a high likelihood that we won't get the results on election night and that we will have to hold the line to make sure that every vote is counted. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Thanu.
Thank you, Brooke. I'm going to talk about what's at stake in this election. This November, the fate of our fragile democracy rests in our hands. Our commitment to act now will ensure that we never have a pandemic like COVID-19 again, that we abate the worst of the climate crisis, that we address racial and economic injustice that have plagued our communities, and that all communities have access to affordable healthcare, good paying jobs, and opportunities rooted in a sustainable economy. That's what's at stake. Before I go on, I'd love to know how many of you plan on voting in this election, or perhaps you've already submitted your mail-in ballots. A poll will appear on the screen now. The poll has a question: what's your plan to vote in this election? With the options being vote early in person, vote by mail, vote on election day, already voted, or other. And I'll give you a couple of minutes. And the results of the poll are that 13% of you are planning on voting early in person, 38% of you are voting by mail, 6% of you are voting on election day, 38% of you have already voted, great job, and 6% are other. Well, great to know that so many of you are voting and have made your choices in terms of how you'll be voting. This election also has high stakes in the global arena as well. If Trump is reelected or assumes power under an illegitimate win, it will have far-reaching global consequences. The US would officially leave the Paris Climate Agreement, and we would see global progress on climate stalled, including the phasing out of fossil fuels. Trump's antics of deploying and weaponizing our military against its citizens could lead other global leaders such as Brazil's Bolsonaro or India's Modi or Britain's Boris Johnson to follow suit and degrade their citizens' civil rights. The world's eyes are on the US election. In the next few weeks, we all have a role to play to defend our democracy. If you have the privilege to vote, please use it. If you are able to be a poll monitor, please do so. And join up with 350 Action in a pledge to become a climate democracy defender to ensure our votes are protected and honored this election season. We know that Trump and his cronies are trying to bully and steal the election, but we're on to them, and we are rising up to show that our power is in our numbers. We count on us. That's why we want to invite you to right now join our call to action. So thank you so much for voting in this election, and we're asking you to also sign up right now to join our Get Out the Vote phone banking effort and to attend or host a post-election event. My colleague Deborah will be putting 2 links in the chat. One is to join us in phone banking to get out the vote, and the second is to take action with us to protect the results of the election. You will see that in the chat now. So I want to go into what 350's role is in defending our democracy. In order to ensure a peaceful transition of power, we need to be part of the movement that is calling on all of our elected officials to honor our votes and defund our democracy. Hundreds of groups have joined in coalition with the Fight Back Table and Protect the Results, 2 coalitions that are working together to host actions across the country and in battleground states. We have partnered with them to work shoulder to shoulder to make sure that every vote is counted before the election is called. We will be part of a big tent coalition, including faith, labor, environmental advocates, immigrant rights advocates, and the Movement for Black Lives to stand up to Trump and his cronies' attempts to erode our democracy. As we fight for our democracy, we will ensure that as wildfires continue to rage in California and hurricanes lambast the Gulf, that climate activists play a key role in protecting the vote this election. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our partners. 350 Action is partnering with Protect the Results and Fight Back Table. Protect the Results was started by Indivisible and Stand Up America and has grown to a coalition of partners committed to upholding the rule of law and safeguarding the final legitimate results of the 2020 election. In the event that Donald Trump loses the election and refuses to concede, the Protect the Results Partner Network will activate their members and take coordinated action to protect our democracy. The Fight Back Table was formed in 2016 to build a broader coalition amongst cross-movement progressive organizations. Following the pandemic, the group formed the Democracy Nerve Center to combat election misinformation, and they are coordinating and training allies in battleground states to protect the vote. 350 Action is proud to partner with them and several other organizations this election season to defend the vote. I will pass it back to my colleague, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Sanu. Next slide. From now until Election Day, our one job is to get out the vote and to turn out in record numbers. We know that the best way to have a peaceful transition is to have a clear winner and a landslide victory defeating Trump. Trump hopes that by sowing chaos and stoking fear, it will stop us from voting at all, but we won't let that happen. We also know that it will take all of us to stop voter suppression and intimidation. We've seen voter purges in key battleground states. And in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, there are pending lawsuits that could kick thousands of voters off the rolls weeks before the election. And in Georgia and Ohio, reports indicate that tens of thousands of voters were wrongfully purged. After the erosion of the Voting Rights Act, we saw heavy poll closures in Georgia, Texas, and Florida. And in Georgia, where voters stood in line for hours and during early voting, we've now seen poll closures force tens of thousands of voters into one polling place. In addition to these voter suppression efforts, this election season, we must also be on guard for voter intimidation. Trump is actively recruiting tens of thousands of poll watchers to urban cities and Native American communities to intimidate voters. Far-right groups like True the Vote are recruiting ex-military and police to battleground states to police the polls. At 350.org, we've been working to ensure that we are turning out every vote. We've been contacting infrequent voters to turn them out, as well as reaching out to voters in states that have faced heavy poll closures, voter purges, and are likely targets for voter suppression and voter intimidation. We need your help these last 20 days to make sure that we are turning out every voter and making sure that every citizen can vote without fear or election. The next phase that we should be on the guard for are from Election Day until December 14th. It's during this period that states will be counting votes and preparing to send their slate of electors to the Electoral College. Immediately following the election, if Trump calls the election before every vote is counted, then we will be ready to defend our democracy. The days following the election will be critical. If we need to, 350 Action will be ready to spring into action and will be hosting post-election events with the post-election week events with Protect the Results. These events will call on state elected officials to stand up and uphold our democracy if Trump tries to claim victory before the last vote is counted. Will have an opportunity later on to either host or attend one of these events with 350 Action and Protect the Results. Following election week, if there are contested elections, we will be asking each of you to take action and demand that our elected officials honor and count our votes. December 8th is a key date for each state. This is a safe harbor deadline for states to submit their slate of electors without facing a challenge by Congress. And December 14th is the date that the delegations will meet and cast their ballots for electors. Next slide. During this time, we could see many threats. One of them is that Trump calls the election before every vote is counted. And the other is that he calls for a rigged election and that states stop counting votes due to pending investigations of voter fraud. The interventions that we know that we have are one, to mobilize with our partners and Protect the Results and attend events from November 5th and our national on November 4th and the National Day of Action on November 7th. Also working to hold state officials accountable to count every vote. There'll be opportunities if you live in a battleground state to send actions to your secretaries of state and other key election officials. And we also know that with the pandemic on the rise, that we can't mobilize the way that we used to. So 350 Action will also be offering ways to participate in COVID safe actions, such as taking action online or showing support for every vote to be counted through visibility actions. The next critical phase is from December 14th to January 6th. And from December 14th to January 6th is when our election will be in the hands of our newly elected Congress. On January 3rd, our new Congress will be seated, and on January 6th, our Congress will count the electoral votes and declare the next president. If the election is contested at this time, we'll continue to mobilize this and to continue to turn our actions and attention to our federal members of Congress and demanding that they elect the president that the people voted for and not to thwart our democracy. And now I'm just going to hand it over if folks have any questions to give some time to make some time for those. So I can start to answer some of the questions that are popping up in the chat. So one from Holly, 350 Action right now isn't campaigning door to door. We do have GOTV efforts where you can phone bank or volunteer directly with a campaign. And we will be making all of these slides available after the call. You'll have access to all of these resources. And then so there's another question from Holly about a general strike. And that is one of the things that we're looking at right now. Our primary goal is to make sure that we're not getting into one of these situations. Um, but that is one of the things that we're talking about in larger circles if it gets to that point. But right now, we know that our best bet is to make sure that Biden wins with a landslide victory and to do everything that we can in these early phases from now until Election Day. Any other additional questions?
Brooke, this is Deborah. I'm reading one in our Q&A, which is, are mass mobilizations planned for DC or in swing states?
So right now, the focus on the post-election week events are to do medium-sized, like joyous, high positive framing events immediately like following the election. And then we have folks in DC and other swing states that are working with local organizations there, but we're not at this time planning mass mobilizations due to the pandemic. And then some of the COVID safe activities that we've been thinking about are one, just digital actions and petitions to your state elected officials, as well as to your members of Congress. You can do letters to the editor, and we again encourage like visibility efforts, like wearing hanging banners and other signs of solidarity. And then I see a question, how do we track events real time from October 30th to November 6th? So this is the most critical period for election malfeasance when this current legitimate Republican administration is at its most concerned and desperate. So what we've been doing is we've been recruiting hundreds of poll monitors and poll watchers to monitor that and been ramping up those efforts in battleground states. And we'll be forming our own communication networks with our coalition partners. One of the resources that they have is just like a live update. That's a C3 update on the elections and counting of the results that are coming back in. And 350 Action will also be preparing to hold another briefing to let you all know what are our next steps depending on the outcome of the election. And then there's a question, what should one be doing if they live in a smaller town? So I think the things are still the same. If you're living in a smaller town, to be one, making sure your community's turning out to vote, helping with electoral efforts in battleground states, volunteering to be a poll monitor. And then if there are contested elections, we'll be asking for groups that aren't in battleground states to hold actions of their own in order to stand in solidarity with those folks. Any other additional questions, Deborah? And right now, we don't have a plan for what to do if major communication sources go down. And the best way, and we can send out, after this call, we can send out information on who to contact to join a local 350 group. Now, if there aren't now I'm going to turn it over to Beta, who's going to be leading us through an exercise to kind of take a breath and digest all the information.
Thanks, Brooke. And hello, everyone. My name is Betania, also go by Beta. I go by she and they. I'm a campaigner here with 350 Action. I'm calling in from Queens in New York City on Lenape land. I am a light-skinned Latina with shoulder-length brown and blue hair, and I'm sitting in my home office. I'm wearing black long sleeves and have on black glasses. And I just want to start off by thanking everyone who put in questions into the chat. Thank you so much, and please continue to do so. We really do want to hear your questions and answer as many as we can. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. And if you're anything like me, hearing all of this on a very real and approaching timeline can bring up a lot of feelings. We all know how hard the last few months have been between the economic crisis, Black lives being lost to police brutality continuously, the pandemic, and catastrophic climate impacts. This can all feel really scary and bring up a lot of emotions for people. So right now, if you're able to, just please type one word in the chat for how did you feel in hearing all of these scenarios, and in hearing these scenarios tied to specific dates that are fast approaching. Let us know how you're feeling in the chat. Some people are feeling energized, worried, angry, unprepared, anxious, fearful, overwhelmed, worried, steadfast, focused, confused. Time to get busy. Yeah, these are all a lot of feelings. So I just want to really honor all that you are, everything that you are all holding. There's 166 people on this call right now, and that's a lot. It's a lot to be holding. And it's really easy to get stuck in feelings of hopelessness. It's really normal for us to be feeling this afraid in this moment. And as overwhelming as all of these emotions can feel, we really want to figure out together how to move ourselves into action. Trump and his cronies are really expecting us to be exhausted by all of their attempts to suppress our movements for justice. But we need to remember always that we are stronger when we fight together. And we wanted to just take a quick pause with all of you here tonight and honor those feelings of scary, fearful, anxious energy that gets brought up when we're hearing all of what might happen in the next few weeks. And just take a moment to breathe together. So I want you to take your attention to your body in whatever position you are most comfortable in right now, and take a few deep breaths with me, and I'll help us by counting to breathe in. 1, 2, 3, and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And continue to just take deep breaths with me. On inhale to 3 and exhale on 4. And I want you to just take a moment to notice if there's anywhere that you're holding tension in your body, and what is the feeling that you have in that place. Are you feeling fear? Are you feeling anxious or worried? Or maybe you might be feeling really jazzed and excited by some of the plans that you're hearing. On your next deep breath in, I want you to just send your deep breaths full of like love and compassion to that place in your body where you might be holding that tension. And continue to exhale all the way. And on your next inhale, I want you to really breathe in some hope and send it to all the corners of your body. Ready? You're breathing in hope on 1, 2, 3. And when you exhale, exhale completely. And just repeat after me. When we organize, we win. And just say that to yourself 3 more times, and I'll say it with you. When we organize, we win. When we organize, we win. When we organize, we win. And thank you all. I'll pass it back to my colleague, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Beta, for that. I know when I first started researching all of these things, it was scary. And now I've been able to really move from fear into action, knowing that exactly what Beta said is right, that when we move from fear into action, that we win. So now I'm going to give all of you an opportunity to take action, and then we're going to make some time for some more Q&A. So for the first thing that you can do, remember from now for the next 20 days, our job is to get out the vote and to make sure that everyone has the right to vote safely. So feel free, get an opportunity just real shortly to get out the vote and sign up for an electoral shift. We partnered with the Environmental Voter Project to contact infrequent climate voters. We've also partnered with Mobilize to elect Green New Deal candidates and to push for Biden to win the presidency. You can also sign up to protect the vote and sign up on election day to be a poll watcher. And then you can sign up with us to defend the vote and have a protect the results post-election event that you either attend or you host. And if you're hosting an action, then 350 will be happy to support you, and we'll be doing a follow-up to this call the week of October 26th, I believe on October 28th, to support our host. And now Deborah is gonna put some links in the chat where you'll be able to sign up. And the links again are to sign up for an electoral shift through Mobilize, to be a poll monitor, as well as to do defend the vote and host a protect the results action. We'll give folks a minute or two to take some time to sign up for those events. And then Deborah, if you wanted to queue up some more questions, we can leave the remaining time for that.
Great, yeah, and just to verbalize that I put in the chat that if folks had questions and answers that you put in the chat and they weren't answered yet, if you could actually put them in the Q&A, that helps us make sure that we'll notice them. Thank you.
And I see a question from Carl. Is there an effort to assemble legal teams in the swing states to get state courts to enforce state election laws? So yes, there are lots of efforts underway that are doing that. That's 350 doesn't have a legal team, so we're not working on that, but there's groups that have been dedicated working to get pledges from secretaries of states and to teach election officials what to do in case they're asked to do something unlawful. Right now, there may be text banking opportunities for Mobilize. You can check that out by clicking on the link in the chat. Unfortunately, we don't have nonpartisan text banking right now. Our partner, Environmental Voter Project, really they had an overwhelming response about text banking. So really right now, what they need are phone bankers, and that's what we've been focusing on. Any other additional questions? From Ben, is there a plan if the electoral college votes are bought, or so to speak? Right now, our best defense is really making sure that we're targeting those state elected officials and making sure that they're upholding the people's vote through the electoral college. So that's really our focus on like why through that period of from election day until December 14th, we're really focusing on our state elected officials to make sure that we get the right slate of electors. And then additional question is, what are some recommendations to encourage young people to vote? I would say one is, of course, to sign up for an electoral shift. With our work with Environmental Voter Project, we are targeting a lot of young and frequent climate voters, as well as just to talk to them about what's at stake in this election and have those conversations with them about what's at stake for their future and why it's so important to vote in this election. And then there's a question about potential responses and the possibility of state legislators asking their electors to vote for Trump, which could give Trump more votes because states are dominated by Republican legislatures. So this would be, thank you, Karen, for that question. So that's why we're really trying to steal up the, at like the state level to make sure that legislators are sending the correct ballots. There's a really, I know there's been a lot of articles about like, what if state legislatures submit a different slate of electors than the governor? And that's a really low likelihood of happening. In order for states to do that, many of them would have to change their laws. Not a lot of states are in session right now just because of the pandemic, and it would raise a lot of alarms if states tried to do that. And the Transition Integrity Project, that was modeled, but it's also a really low likelihood that that would happen. And in that case, it would be in the hands of Congress, and it would be like a toss up with the slate that we have right now. But that's only in the case of a really contested, close election where it's hinging on one of those states. So I think really it's making sure we're acting from now until December 14th to hold our state elected officials' feet to the fire to make sure that they are upholding our votes and sending the slate of electors that represents those votes. There will be ongoing email communication from 350 over the next few weeks. We'll be really focusing on getting out the vote, as well as making sure that you all are prepared to take next steps in case in the days where we might not know what the election results are. How do you help young people not turn to violence post-election? I think one of the things that each of our movements, and if you're part of a local group or a coalition, is that we all need to make a commitment to nonviolent direct action and to have peace in the center of these movements. We know that we've been depicted as the radical left and looting and all of these things, and we don't want to play into those narratives that could trigger, if we incite violence, then other folks are going to incite violence, which could lead to dire consequences if that violence like triggers the Insurrection Act, where Trump is like actively weaponizing or deploying our military against us, and we don't want a situation to happen. So I think if you're planning events or hosting events, that we're putting into all of those, the core of those events, nonviolence and peaceful demonstration. And then on 350, do we have any plans about the Supreme Court nominee? No, not at this time. Really, our focus has been on the elections and election protection. And it looks like Cecily is having trouble with the link for the Common Cause.
Yeah, I was offering for Cecily to email me, and I'll forward it to the appropriate
Okay.
people.
Any additional questions before we? All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. As it's been said before, everyone will be sent an email after this call with the links to this presentation, a recording, a transcript, as well as ways that we can take action. If you are planning on hosting an event with 350 Action and protect the results, then there will be a follow-up call on October 27th to get you all trained up and to offer host support. and that information will be out there as well. And then we'll also be hosting a post-election briefing. And if things do escalate, we'll be holding calls and calls to action every step of the way so that you all know how you can mobilize and take action to defend our democracy. Thank you all so much. And please remember Beta's words that when we organize, we win. Thanks and have a great night.
During commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox and 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance.